Oh, it says it right there. Act like you didn't see it. Well, that's that. What was divided up into 4 occupation zones at Yalta? Germany and what city? Berlin. And so Berlin, since it's in the middle of the Soviet occupation zone, would be the symbol of the Cold War. And the Soviets promised to attack whom 3 months after VE Day? Japan. Now this was top secret. Nobody outside of this meeting knew this, that they had planned to attack. And, oh, what was created for the brand new United Nations that would make all the major decisions, but 5 countries had a veto? What was created for the brand new United Nations? What was it called? Better look it up if you don't know. Security Council. The Security Council makes all the important decisions for the UN. It says there's a veto. Nothing really controversial ever comes out of the Security Council there for the UN. And the US also promised reparations. What did Stalin say? What area did he say would have free elections? Not just Europe. What else?
Eastern Europe.
Yeah, all Eastern Europe. So that includes the brand new Poland. Poland now has totally different borders. Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria. Yugoslavia liberated themselves from the Germans, so they're kind of in a gray area. The Soviets did not liberate Yugoslavia. So that's where we quit. We got, when was VE Day? What day?
May 6th.
May, close. May 8th. And conservative pro-Cold War, Cold Warriors, what did they compare Yalta to? What conference? Oh, it's right up there still. Roosevelt died. Is this right where we quit?
We got to Los Alamos.
We got right here?
Yes.
So they constructed the bomb at Los Alamos. $2 billion to the Manhattan Project. When did Truman find out about the Manhattan Project?
When you...
Yeah, he had no idea. And go to Los Alamos, it's really cool. And so, Leslie Groves, the overall commander, Oppenheimer in charge of the science team, because he was kind of political. And did I show you this map of how vast the program was? And so they knew they had uranium-235, and then when plutonium was made out of the first chain reaction, actually the first chain reaction that would take place would be under the football stadium at the University of Chicago, even though they had already gotten rid of football, but it was a big cement building. They made plutonium. And so the decision was to make 2 bombs. One plutonium, which they knew could be much bigger, and one out of uranium-235, which would be smaller, but they knew it would be an easier bomb to make. Yes?
For that uranium-235, it needed to be enriched, so they made hundreds of enrichment machines.
Yes.
Correct?
Centrifuges, yeah.
That's also where the different electricity sites came in, correct?
Yeah, right here. That's what, at Oak Ridge, that's where they had all the centrifuges that would, to separate 238 from 235.
It only enriched a fraction of a microgram per day. Right?
Yeah. So it took a very long time. That's why they needed a lot of them. And so they knew the uranium bomb would work. It's called the uranium gun weapon. Trinity they were not sure about. Trinity is the plutonium bomb. So to this day we call this the Trinity bomb. This is the prototype of all atomic bombs to this day. So they went through a lot of experimentation. They were hoping to have it done before Germany surrendered, but they didn't make it. And so it's a big sphere because you have a uranium, it's called deuteronium in the center, surrounded by a sphere, a perfect sphere of plutonium. Deuteronium, plutonium. And then that's surrounded by shaped charges that all explode at the same time. It compresses the uranium to a chain reaction. Bomb. That's the plan. They weren't sure it would work, and they're also kind of worried that it would explode, cause a chain reaction in the atmosphere and destroy the world. But they rolled the die and did it anyways. And as luck would have it, they didn't do it. They were expecting anywhere from 5 to 10 kilotons. That's 5 to 10,000 tons of TNT. So a massive explosion. It was double that. It just exploded, like, oh my God, it's huge. It did not destroy the world, and Trinity worked. The uranium gun weapon, they were very sure it would work, and I'll tell you about that one in just a second. But this one, 20 to 21 kilotons, a massive explosion. This happened, therefore, high plateau, White Sands, New Mexico, during the last conference of the Big Three, Potsdam. Potsdam and Yalta are really important. Yalta is really important for the decision of the atomic bomb, and Potsdam will show how far apart they were. So July of 45, while they're getting ready for Trinity, the Big Three met. Potsdam is the old castle for the Prussian Empire. So it's about 40 miles outside of Berlin. And so here's Truman. He arrived in Berlin and got to drive through the absolute destruction of Berlin. But it was also Stalin wanted it there and kind of show off. Look what my army did. It's a resort outside of Potsdam. Now it's an historic site. Been there. It's really neat. But the Big Three, sure, it's Stalin, but then Truman, like, who's Truman? Churchill went to it. This is the first day. But Britain had their first election for parliament since the war began. So Truman actually went back the second day for the election. And his party, the Tories, the conservatives lost huge, got devastated. And the Labour leader, Clement Attlee, came back as prime minister. Attlee had been part of the wartime cabinet, so he was not like Churchill. He knew what was going on. But you can imagine what Stalin is thinking. Okay, Roosevelt and Churchill were tyrants. Truman? Attlee? Peons. And he treated them like that. And Truman was already very insecure about the way he became president. He kind of had been his whole life. And so how Stalin kind of lorded over him just infuriated Truman. So one of the first things they did is they said, okay, the four powers will come up with a four-power commission, and they will decide the future of Germany. They would all agree, and the assumption was sometime down the road there'll be a decision on Germany making a country. The big thing is a common currency, because before, in all these occupation zones, each occupying army made their own occupation currency. They called it scrip. They didn't have a financial system. You can't have an economy without a financial system. Therefore, you need a government to reinforce a dollar. So they just basically have to set that up. They never really came up with anything. And then we're jumping to this. I'll come back. I got this in the wrong order. And then remember those free elections? That's when Stalin informed Attlee and Truman, they're not going to happen. No. And there's not going to be reparations. The Allies informed them. Stalin wanted a buffer zone. You see this area right here? He wanted a buffer zone between the Soviet Union and Germany. He was convinced that the Allies are planning on rearming Germany and sending them back. Yes, Stalin was shockingly paranoid. And so the idea of having a government that might not be pro-Soviet was beyond his comprehension. He just was like, of course I'm not going to have elections there. And then the Allies, they looked at their occupation zone. They saw Berlin. Germany was destroyed. Every city had been bombed. They have no economy. There's no money. You can't get blood from a stone. They don't have a government. They don't have anything. There's no reparations. But to Stalin, he looks at it like, so you Allies, Britain and the United States, you use Soviet blood to win the war. And then when the war is over, the bandits. That's the way he saw it. And so this is a big controversy. Now we got to go back. Britain and the United States, remember the Soviets are neutral still, would issue the Potsdam Declaration. And it said, Japan must accept unconditional surrender or face total and complete destruction. Unconditional surrender or destruction. This is just the US and Britain. The Soviets are still neutral. Japan has no idea the Soviets are going to attack. Now I should have. There's some wiggle room written into it for a very important reason that implied the emperor. It talked about keeping the current or certain current situations. That was a kind of maybe have a condition, but we're not going to say it. So that came out of this. So Truman was mad this whole time. And then in the middle of Potsdam, just after Stalin informed no free elections, and after Britain and the United States issued that, Truman was given a message. The baby is born. The baby is born was code for the atomic bomb worked. So Truman heard about Trinity. And he was overjoyed. And who's the first person he told? Stalin. He wanted Stalin to be afraid of him. Stalin strutted around with his conquering armies. Well, yeah, you might have the great army, but look at our bomb. And he said, we have a bomb that might be able to destroy an entire city or an entire harbor. One bomb destroy an entire city, just one time. One plane, one bomb, that's it. And he thought Stalin would be like, oh my God, you're so strong. And how did Stalin react? I know. He just popped down his pipe and said, good, I hope you use it against the Japanese. And he was like, no, I want you afraid. Why was Stalin so casual?
He had spies.
He had spies in Los Alamos. He knew about the plan. No, he didn't know about Trinity, but he knew what they were doing. So that was not a surprise. And the plans for the Trinity bomb were already on their way to the Soviet Union. And in 1949, the Soviets would explode their first bomb, and it would be an exact replica of Trinity. So Truman was irked, upset. And you can say that Potsdam was the first meeting of the Cold, or the first real beginning of the Cold War. Yalta, you can see hints of it. Now, I want to be clear. People outside of Potsdam, let's say regular citizens of the United States, had no idea about this disagreement. You know, there was issues they feared about Stalin, but there are allies now. We're going to come together. Everything's a beautiful post-war peace. They didn't know about this. And then it would shock them when it actually kind of blew up in their face. These are some of the things they put up in Berlin. So a teacher who retired last year. I don't know if anyone had Mr. Long for a teacher, math teacher. Mr. Long's dad was in the first American unit that went into Berlin, into the American occupation zone. So he was there when this happened. And what he remembers are they had all these Roosevelt pictures because the Soviets had been getting this ready for about 4 months. So they covered them real hastily with Truman pictures. There's still Roosevelt pictures out because Roosevelt died just a couple months earlier, including this one. So I just thought that was pretty interesting. So one of the things, I mentioned this before, when the Soviets conquered, the first thing they did is built a memorial. And this massive memorial right here, that's what it looks like today. Well, this is about 8 years ago, but still, I'm the same. And I love this picture. This shows right at Potsdam, and you can see the hulk of the Reichstag behind it. And they built this memorial really quick. So the Soviets wanted everyone to know, we conquered here. And so here is supposedly the first Soviet tank to enter Berlin. And who knows if it really was. They got 2 tanks there, tank here, tank here. This is me trying to be artsy. So, you know, some statue framed by the barrel. Aren't you impressed? At least act like you're kind of impressed. Aren't you impressed? Yeah.
So because this is in Berlin, but it was made by the Soviet Union.
Yeah, the Soviet.
Would Germans dislike it for that reason?
It had a lot of resentment, but now it is just part of Berlin, and they keep it immaculate, even though they won't let you climb on it. The first time I went, you could get in there. Now they won't. Yeah, it's all fenced off, and they have a 30-acre one on the other side of Berlin. Oh, and the funny part is this is in the British occupation zone. So they made it real quick for the British to have. I just find that a little bit of the gamesmanship, and it's so childish in a way. So while all this is going on, the U.S. did try strategic bombing Remember the bombing of factories that they tried against Germany? And it didn't work very well against Germany, at least not as well as they had hoped. The Americans had made a $4 billion, even more expensive than the Manhattan Project, a $4 billion heavy bomber called the B-29 Superfortress. And this plane was going to be able to fly at 35,000 feet. It's the first American production plane with pressurized cabins. So they could get that high. They thought over Japanese defenses, and the thought was these planes would accurately bomb Japanese factories during the daytime and destroy Japanese industry. They would be forced to surrender. And they would be used from bases they took in 44, Guam, Tinian, and Saipan. So these are amazing planes, at least on the surface. They had all kinds of problems, mechanical problems with them. And there's something else. They couldn't hit anything at 35,000 feet at that time. Some Japanese planes could get that high. They weren't pressurized, so the crew was very uncomfortable, but they could get that high. And there's something else. When American planes started flying towards Japan, some days they would run into a headwind of 100 to 150 miles per hour. Sometimes the wind was so strong that the planes couldn't get halfway there before they had to turn around. The abort rate was about 50%. And so it was a disaster. They went through 2 commanders. It wasn't working. Let's see, wind. 30,000 feet up, 100 miles per hour. You might know what they discovered they had no idea about. It goes around the world. They discovered the jet stream. They had no idea about the jet stream. And so when they got into the jet stream, it just crushed the attacks. So let's put it this way. By February, this amazing plane, they thought, multi-billion-dollar project was failing miserably. And thousands of soldiers and Marines died taking those islands for this plane. But remember, the Japanese knew about the jet stream, and they used it. They made hydrogen balloons, and they lofted them that summer of 45, spring and summer, into the jet stream, and they filled them with incendiary bombs. And they would have a combination of dropping sandbags and slowly releasing the air, a mechanism set up on a timer. And the thought was that they would float with the jet stream over the American Northwest. They would crash land and create forest fires here, and the U.S. would be forced to send all their troops back to fight the fires. Now, this is a little bit unrealistic, but that was their plan. And look how many, all these red dots. Look how many as far as Michigan. They hit all over. No, it did not cause the fires. No, it did not cause the panic after the initial hit. The U.S. censored the news, so they didn't really let people know how many they actually dropped. But we're talking over 100. Look how many hit Montana. So they tried. Didn't work. Yeah. So the closest to Helena was a little bit north of Boulder. Yeah.
Weren't some people also like finding some near this time, like, oh, found a bomb that was released during this time, but it just never activated?
Yeah. In fact, my wife's grandfather found one near Phillipsburg 2 years after the war. Found part of a balloon and part of an incendiary bomb that just kind of crumbled and for whatever reason didn't go. So that's the Japanese effort. But remember Dresden, the firebombing of German cities. So Dresden was in February, the same time when the realization hit to the new commander of the Pacific Air Force, the 15th Air Force. It's not working. There's Dresden and Berlin destroyed. And this worked. There's also something else about Japanese cities. Japanese cities, especially Tokyo and south, the temperature is very, very mild. And so the walls of most Japanese buildings were paper, wax paper. It kept out the rain. And then they had really big, thick, heavy roofs. So basically, a structure with big, heavy roofs because of typhoons. And so if they could burn underneath, these walls would collapse and the fires would be huge. Wouldn't the same tactics work well for Japan? Curtis LeMay was the commander of the U.S. Army Air Force in the Marianas, an experienced, hard-nosed, very controversial character. And he decided to save the campaign, they would resort to firebombing. So instead of B-29s flying at 35,000 feet during the daytime, that's what they trained for, they would bomb at night at 12,000 feet so they'd be less vulnerable, but they're not trying to hit anything except for cities. And they would drop white phosphorus and napalm. And they knew this would destroy cities. The crew just about mutinied. They were furious about this. You know, they were trained for this other thing. They thought they were all going to get shot down, and many more. But they were closer to Japanese anti-aircraft, but they're bombing at night. They painted the bottom white, they pulled out some of their defenses, and they bombed at 12,000 feet. 400 planes bombed Tokyo on the night of March 9th and 10th of 1945, a month after Dresden. 400 planes. A massive raid. This had never been done before in the war against Japan. And the first planes came with high explosives, and then plane wave after wave of bombers with firebombs. This is what it looked like from the last planes taking it. They were also had reconnaissance cameras. And it was so hot that they could feel intense heat on the plane at 12,000 feet. That's Tokyo on the left. Tokyo was absolutely devastated. Look at the destruction of Tokyo. Tokyo is bigger than New York City. 25% of it was gone. I don't mean just damaged, I mean gone. And get this down. Between 100 and 120,000 people died. Either burnt alive or died by asphyxiation. The oxygen was sucked out of them because of the firestorm. It was the biggest firestorm ever created. Mass death like this was unheard of. So the next morning, U.S. reconnaissance planes flew over to take pictures of the damage, and they could smell the burning bodies from 15,000 feet, 50 to walk in on. Where were you? Oh, no. Okay, console. And what happened to LeMay after this kind of mass murder? He got his 4th star. He got promoted in a medal. And they started firebombing every Japanese city they could. The only reason they didn't firebomb more, they didn't have enough bombs. They firebombed until they ran out of bombs, and then they firebombed again all rest of the spring through the summer of 1945. Yes.
How many people have lived in Tokyo during this time?
There were over 7 million people in Tokyo. So this was devastating. And so the survivors went through a hell we can't imagine. Yeah. Between 100 and 120,000. We don't know the exact numbers because so many people just disappeared. And so, this map has a number next to it, and the numbers are really kind of hard to see. It has a city and the percentage that was destroyed. But then I found another map of this, and I thought this one was pretty good. So this one shows Japanese cities that were attacked. Japanese cities. And it has a comparison American city in size. So for example, here we have Tokyo. So 40% of Tokyo by the end of the war would be gone because they bombed other cities too. That's equivalent to New York. Yokohama, massive harbor city below it, nearly 60% gone. Where's Toyota? Nagoya, the size of LA, 40% gone. Osaka, the size of Chicago, 35% gone. Toyama, the size of Butte, 83% gone. So they bombed everything. And I want to be clear about it. That's just not damage. Gone. Tens of thousands of Japanese civilians would be killed over the next 6 months. Absolute slaughter. Remember total war. Makes civilians suffer so much that they want to end the fight. And I also told you that war gets worse sometimes when the war was over because the Japanese military was utterly and completely defeated. And yet they were doing this all summer. All summer doing this in Japanese cities. While this is going on, the United States Navy had tried to blockade Japanese cities by 43. But as they got closer to Japan and the submarine bases got closer, going into 45, they had completely cut off Japan from all their supply areas. They couldn't get food and resources from China, And remember, they started this war to get oil from the Dutch East Indies. American submarines had sunk most of their transport and oil tanks by the summer of 45. By August of 1945, Japan had 3 months of oil and 6 months of food in their reserves, and that's it. And their reserves were already diminished. The average diet for a Japanese civilian was less than 500 calories a day. And they're being told we're winning the war. But just a little more south, the war is almost over. People don't really talk that much about the submarines because they're not as glamorous as aircraft carriers and battleships. But they destroyed the Japanese transport fleet, killing thousands of Japanese merchant sailors. An absolute devastation. So let's be clear about this. By December of 45, Japan can't fight anymore. They're done. December of 45. They might, the army was insane. They might have stayed fighting, but they were done by December of 45. They just couldn't fight anymore. The U.S. knew. Let me rephrase that. We had a pretty good idea. Heck, by the summer, our aircraft carriers were just going up and down the coast of Japan bombing it. They were completely and utterly defeated. But by the summer of 45, they'd even sent peace force. So as I sent word, December 45. Did I put 44 on that? We started the block, it was December of 45. Yeah. So the summer of 45, Japan is utterly defeated. The blockade really started working by 44. So by 45, they're out of food. So the summer of 45, they sent peace fielders. They didn't know that the Soviets were ready to attack them. And they had one basic condition. Do you remember what their condition was? They want to keep their what? Emperor. Now, we don't know if they would have said the emperor, we're going to surrender and we keep the emperor, and the army would have agreed. We don't know. Maybe, maybe not. But they were done. We basically ignored that. We ignored the whole issue with the emperor. We didn't even respond. We got it through the Soviets. Even the Soviets were like, don't surrender. Stalin wants land. But the Potsdam Declaration included a little bit about the emperor. Gave a caveat. But Japan, in essence, ignored the Potsdam Declaration. I'm sorry, ignore is kind of covered. Japan ignored it. Even though the Potsdam Declaration gave a window open for the emperor, Japan ignored it. The U.S. was furious. They ignored it. They didn't even respond. And we're like, wait a minute. You sent peace fielders to the Soviet Union and you ignore this? This was cultural. The Japanese government got the Potsdam Declaration. And the way, culturally, they looked at this and they said, this is unacceptable. We're not going to look at it. That meant to the Japanese, we're asking you to give us another. Give us something else. I'll say the emperor specifically. We didn't know that. We thought it was, you're just ignoring it. You just show contempt. We might have to kill all of you. To the Japanese, it's negotiating. So, going into the August, Japan had these peace fillers out. We had this atomic bomb. The U.S. wants unconditional surrender. And to many Americans, especially the planners, we appear to be dealing with not just an enemy that fights hard, but a beast. What was that peninsula in the Philippines? That they had the prison, the POW march, and so many would be killed, American. You remember that? It was that march with the Japanese marched POWs. Do you remember that? Remember what it was called? Anybody remember? Well, you guys have notes. You can figure out. Yeah. Yeah, the Bataan Death March. How they dealt with POWs, the kamikazes, the way they fight. And this war was just dripping with racism. By the United States towards Japanese, all kinds of ethnic, racist stereotypes, and the Japanese too. Both sides were kind of shockingly racist. And so you had this. And remember the fighting on Iwo Jima and Okinawa. Those are the abbreviations for Iwo Jima and Okinawa. Is the Japanese mainland going to be like this? So Kyushu, the southern Japanese island, the US plan was to attack that island first if we have to invade Japan. We didn't want to attack near Tokyo. And Truman was told we might get as high as 31,000 US casualties. What's a casualty?
Dead or injured.
Killed, wounded, or missing. So they can't fight. Now that's unbelievably high. But one important thing to know, the Army, the military, estimated the number of casualties on Okinawa and Iwo Jima. So this very well could be higher if Japan fights in the same way. So this is going to be a bloodbath, potentially. If Japan won't surrender, and the plan was for December of 45, meaning when Japan's out of oil. So Japan is withering on the vine, the entire nation. Truman, after the war, this is really important, is going to say, it wasn't 31,000. What he's going to say is 1 million casualties. That's what he'll say after the war. So he could say, I saved 1 million American lives. And people to this day still say what Truman said. Why did he exaggerate this after the war? I mean, why?
To justify the law.
Justify using it. To justify using it. By the way, this is a pamphlet. This is a leaflet they would drop to the Japanese in August of 1945 saying, more firebombs are coming. Surrender. Tell your government to surrender. They would drop that to Japanese citizens. And they exaggerate. Okay. So, also, one more really important thing. What has been happening to Japanese civilians this entire summer of 45? They're killing them by the thousands. After the initial shock, they had better defenses to prepare for it, but still, we're killing Japanese civilians by the thousands. We built this project to use on Japan. $2 billion we spent for this. $2 billion. Can you imagine Truman going after the war saying, you know, we spent $2 billion of your hard-earned dollars and we didn't even use it because we're scared about killing some civilians. And maybe your boys died in this fight. And you think Stalin would be very impressed with a country afraid to use their own weapon? That's a key element. What would Stalin think of us? They consciously thought that. But then one more important thing. Why not bomb civilians with an atomic bomb? Why not? What's the difference? We killed 120,000 in one night. What's the difference? We've killed so many. We've burned alive so many. How is one atomic bomb different than firebombing? To the planners, they didn't see it, the implications of what this could mean to civilization. They saw it as, we've already killed so many. Why can't we use the bomb? How is this morally different than killing 120,000 with firebombs? So they don't see it the way people in the future looking back at it. For one very important reason, they didn't understand. And I'm going beyond one thing some of you might be thinking. They totally underestimate the radiation. But here's the biggie. 400 planes bombed Tokyo that night. Killed 120,000 people. Everyone get that image? That was one plane, one bomb on Hiroshima. Now just imagine we have 400 planes, each with an atomic bomb. Doesn't that change your entire calculus? Now we're talking the end of the world. They weren't thinking that way. We can think that way. But they're just thinking it's another bomb. And something else today, people don't think about the firebombs today. They don't think about killing thousands of civilians already. Now, there are people who just believe like the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, so we dropped an atomic bomb. that was the war. No. A lot of stuff was happening. So, the Soviets said August 8th. But they later said, okay, we'll be ready to go by August 15th. August 15th? I know everyone turned it. It was kind of funny. I love this picture of Stalin just casually lighting his cigarette. He smoked constantly. And Truman, like, oh, I hate this guy. And then here's Clement Attlee, who just looks like he's a deer in the headlights. Like, I'm Prime Minister. Okay, so they pledge August 15th. We've had this long fear of the communists. Remember the Red Scare, bomb-throwing arrogance. They abandoned us in World War I. Stalin was a brutal dictator whose policies would lead to the famine death of millions of people, especially in Ukraine. His purges had killed thousands of his own members of his own party and army. He was a horrible dictator. So there were legitimate reasons to fear him, and also the kind of the fear of communism. Now, a lot of it was just we didn't understand it. Combined with the Red Army was terrifying. They must be 8 feet tall. That communism must be the secret drug they take. It really scared us. And Yalta, they promised Eastern Europe would be democratic elections and choose their own government. Didn't do it. Where's Stalin going to quit? Is this his plan to take over the world? Are we going to have to give him occupation zones in Japan now? Does that mean they're going to have a foothold in the Pacific, in China? Where will Stalin end? The United States wanted to demobilize and end this war. They wanted out. And the fear was the Soviets are just going to keep grabbing everything they could. We wanted to convince the Soviets to accept what you got, and that's it. Or as the terminology they used, we wanted them to play ball. To not demand anything more and to accept what happened, or to accept Yalta, to accept their agreements. Which, of course, we went against the agreements too. Don't forget that. So there's lots of things going on here. So, August 15th. Truman never ordered the dropping of the atomic bomb. He never, after the war, he's going to act like I made careful, considerate decision on where to drop it. No, not at all. He just checked off, literally checked off, that he approved the dropping of the bomb when the Army Air Force was ready to drop it. The commander of the Army Air Force was Hap Arnold. Arthur Arnold, everyone called him Hap. Happy. And he just could decide. And they gave Truman a list of targets of Japanese cities, and he just checked it off. So Truman did not make this decision like you think about, okay, we'll drop the atomic bomb and weigh his options. No, so, all right, we'll use it when you're ready. But they all knew, we got to get this dropped before August 15th. We got to get it dropped. And so they rushed the bomb to Tinian Island. Truman is just coming back from Potsdam. And August 6th, 1945. The first bomb was dropped on Hiroshima. Now, I forgot to tell you, I'll go back. I know, don't worry. Everything's cool. One place was never firebombed. That place was called Hiroshima. It was never firebombed. They wanted a place that if they used this bomb, they could show the damage that bomb did and not confuse it with damage from firebombs. Now I go back. We just went this fast. So this was what they called a uranium gun weapon, or little boy. That's it right here. It's a long, thin bomb. It's long and thin because right here they have a big block of uranium-235. And then they literally have a 105 millimeter howitzer, part of it right here. And it's going to fire a piece of uranium into another piece. Bang! And that would create the chain reaction. They were pretty sure that would work. There's a lot of flaws with this bomb, and they didn't know how big it would be, but they figured about 10 kilotons was about 14 to 15 kilotons. And they dropped that on Hiroshima. They'd been doing 3-plane reconnaissance / training missions over Hiroshima during the day for almost a month. Not every day, but 3 planes would fly over. To where the people here in Hiroshima in the mornings, they would see these 3 planes and not rush to the bomb shelters. So 3 planes, practice runs. And so on August 6th, here comes 3 planes. The Enola Gay, the plane carrying the atomic bomb, that's Colonel Paul Tibbets right there, that's his wife. Flying, and then 2 spotter planes. 2 spotters. And so when they dropped the bomb, no one in Hiroshima rushed to the shelters. They just thought it was another, reconnaissance. They wanted as many people out in the open as possible. They exploded it. This is from the rear tail turret of the Enola Gay, about 10,000 feet in the air. So the ground wouldn't absorb the shock. It would expand. Hiroshima is really flat. And so the shock wave would knock down buildings, and then the big killer. That's the big killer. Yeah.
Did also a lot of people move to Hiroshima because it was now getting firebombed?
A lot of, like Dresden, a lot of refugees. Good point. And so here's afterwards, and that's a weird one, autographed by Paul Tibbets, the pilot of the Enola Gay. Yeah, he would sell his autograph. Surreal, isn't it? And the burns, horrible burns. That was a big killer. The firestorm, though, was the big killer. The firestorm would even be bigger than Tokyo. 70,000 people would die. We don't know how many people died of the effects of the burns and then the radiation afterwards. We just don't know. But there's Hiroshima before. That's Hiroshima. 70% of the building's gone. Just gone. Now, remember firebombing? We didn't quit firebombing while this is going on. We still firebombed three cities in between Hiroshima and Nagasaki. They didn't quit doing that. Yeah. Oh, right here. This was now it's International Peace Building, but then it was the Japanese First Army Headquarters. Yeah, there was Army Headquarters there, but a lot of places Army Headquarters, but no industry. Yeah.
On August 15th, what were they pledging?
To attack Japan.
Exactly.
Yeah. So they pledged, we're coming August 15th. By the way, when the Soviets realized this, what do you think the Soviets did? We got to attack soon.
Are we doing the DBQ tomorrow or Wednesday?
Oh, tomorrow, the DBQ will be Wednesday. The DBQ will be Wednesday. I thought I said that at the beginning of class, didn't I?
You said it to me.
I just said it to you. Yeah, I didn't finish. DBQ will be Wednesday.
Very good.
I really thought I said it to all of you.
Yeah, you told me.
I wanted to say it to all of you. Thank you for saying something.
Are you going to the library today?
Oh, we're going to do some basic class for one.
Okay. We're going to have a packet. I was gone.
Oh, just read it, and as you read it, just make sure we have, just we jot down things like this to help you out for your reading.
Okay.
That's just for your notes. Just read.
I
Huh?
had a guitar and I was in the light. I had a guitar and I was in the light.
Awesome.
I have a song.
Very good. How long did you learn Blackbird?
It took me like a week or two.
That's awesome. That's really good. That's cool. Yeah, that's awesome. I love Blackbird. Well, of course.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, but that is great. Cool.
Yeah. I have to return this guitar.
Yeah, go. Cool. I'm glad.
I like the necklace, man.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks for doing that. Thanks for showing me that. That's cool. Thanks, Lou.
So seeing this board, reading the thing, I just wanted to quickly ask about the DBQ. If 3 decent points would be the fear of Soviets and the Reds moving into Japan, unconditional surrender, and Japan refusing to surrender because of the emperor, and also the justification of the Manhattan Project, and it was just another bomb after we had done so many firebombs.
So you could do 3 or pick 2 of those and just do a 4 paragraph essay.
Oh, what's there to doing a 4 and a 5?
Well, the only thing about this is, let's say we don't have enough time to get all 5 paragraphs we need to show now.
I could maybe get 5. The issue is always the conclusion, just because I suck at writing conclusions.
Yeah, and think about it is on a timed essay, even though we want to get a good conclusion. That's the one they grade the least. You know, see, that's the least important paragraph in the comments.
Yeah, but honestly, thinking about the bombing, for some reason, I think I could write this down decently, just because it's very defined on the reason that part about class, you know?
Yeah.
They really want to mention Truman and how FDR wouldn't have, but I don't know if that'd be good to mention.
No, I would just stick with the main fact.
Just stick with
You
the
can't,
idea.
don't get into things you have to kind of guess on.
Yeah.
Just go right to it. Sounds good, then you're going to be ready.
All right.
See you tomorrow, and then it'll be on Wednesday. Thank you for saying so. I really thought.
I need to mention that tomorrow, just for people that get confused.
Yeah.